For this gorgeous soft blanket, today we are using the Bernat blanket yarn again. This is by Yarnspirations. I have really been loving this yarn because several reasons. One, it's very easy to work with. Number two, it gives a great texture. Number three, you can use it single strand, double strand, triple strand, depending on how chunky you want your blanket and how soft and squishy you want it, because this stuff is just delightful. Every skein of yarn that you're going to get, it's going to give you some information on the back in regards to a number that they associate with the bulkiness of the yarn. And this one happens to be a number 6 super bulky. And it also gives some recommendations for sizes of knitting needles or crochet hooks. We're not going to be using either one today. We're just using our hands. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then it also gives information as far as whether this is washable, dryable, whether you can iron it, what have you. This is machine washable and dryable. I do always recommend, even though it does say right on the label, machine washable and dryable, I will typically only wash these on a gentle cycle, and then I will air dry them. You can dry them. It does tend to change the texture of the yarn just a little bit. The heat does, it'll tend to singe it up a little bit, especially if you leave it in too long. So for me, it's just safer to let them air dry. The color of this yarn is called Whipped Cream. This one is a very creamy, very warm toned yarn. It is a little bit more on the yellow side. I have been searching for the perfect milky, creamy, colored paint, drapes, yarn, you name it. And it is a bit more of a challenge than you would think. And they vary anywhere from your warm tones to your cool tones. Just to give you a perspective, when I set these next to a white piece of paper, you can see just how much yellow is in these. I would never come up to you and say that is a yellow yarn, but you can definitely see the yellow in there. So it is on the yellow creamy rather than more of the milky white creamy. But beautiful, absolutely beautiful in the whipped cream. There is a vintage white that's a little more on the milky creamy side if you're interested in that versus this one. But that's just, again, one more reason why this yarn is so wonderful is I believe it comes in something like 30 colors. So lots to choose from. All right, let's get started. So for this blanket, I am going to be doubling up our strands, because why not? If you know me by now, you know that the super chunky blankets are my favorite. And there are times, especially if I'm gonna give away the blanket, sometimes I'll go ahead and save one of the labels. This is just a little tip for you. I'll save one of the labels and actually attach it to the back of the blanket so that whoever I'm giving this to, they can see the care for the type of yarn that I'm using, and also the type and color that I used, so that they have that information in case, who knows, maybe they want to give some information to somebody else on how to make one. Now, with these skeins, sometimes it's a little tricky to find the end. Typically, they will hide it in one of these ends here, but my last few, I have noticed that they're tucking it in on the side. So all you're gonna wanna do is find the ends of each one of these skeins. And here it is tucked into the end here. And just kind of give yourself a little bit of slack in the yarn and set them a little bit away from you. It could be on the table, it could be on the floor next to you, whatever is more comfortable for you. And then as we begin this blanket, we begin every blanket with a slip knot. And I just wrap the yarn right around my hand like this. I'll tuck this in so that you can kind of see that loop form there. Hold on to that loop and then grab your this is called the working yarn, and your tail, and just simply pull that tight, okay? You can adjust your slip knot, smaller or larger, okay? For this blanket, you're gonna wanna have some wiggle room in between your thumb and index finger here. And this chain, what we're gonna wanna do is create a chain of 50 stitches, and we're gonna want this to be a little bit on the loose side. So when I say loose, what I mean by that is that we don't want to have a chain, and I'll just show you real quick, that is super small loops like this. This is probably as small as I can get them with my big fingers here. So this one is a tighter chain, but for this blanket, we're going to loosen this up a bit, and we're gonna go ahead and create some bigger chains. And I'm pulling this through and kind of twisting to get my finger in there again, and just pull through and twist a little bit. And you can see the difference here in how much looser this chain is. The reason why I say that is as we work up our rows, what happens if your chain is too tight in the beginning, your blanket is gonna start to go like this, because it's gonna be a really tight chain, and then your stitches are gonna be bigger and heavier and looser, and so your blanket is gonna start to bow. So because we're doing some bigger, heavier stitches for this blanket, we want to start with a looser chain, and that way it'll keep a nice flat bottom to the blanket, and it won't start to bow and look like this was tied too tight. Best example I can give is if you have like a hoodie sweatshirt and you have the drawstrings on it and you pull them tight, that's exactly what too tight of a chain will do for your blanket. So just a bit looser there, nothing drastic. Pick right back up where we left off. And for those of you who have missed my last video, the best way to count your chains, if you've stopped and need to pick it back up or you've lost count, is you're just gonna count these circles here, or you can also count these top bumps through here to know how many chains you have. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this is our 5th chain. And as you just saw me adjust, feel free to do that whenever you need to. And I just like to have a little bit of slack on my working yarn, just so that I'm not fighting the tension when I'm trying to pull these chains through. So when I do get the yarn tight, I'll just pull some more. And you'll do that many, many times as you're working up your blanket. Again, just to give that slack and ease of working with it and pulling through your stitches. So go ahead and work up your chain of 50, and I will meet you at the end. I've chained on 50 stitches, and I'm gonna go ahead and get my fingers set in this loop here and hang on to this. And what we'll end up doing is flipping our chain over. I always flip it over to reveal these top bumps in my chain, because I always like to work my first row into these bumps. That way the bottom of the blanket has that beautiful braid pattern that you're also gonna get on the top. A lot of patterns will have you work into just this top loop right here, and then the bottom of your blanket becomes this twisted design, which, don't get me wrong, it's pretty. I just like to have the bottom of my blanket with that flat braid and the top of my blanket with the flat braid, just for consistency. So it's just my preference. You can do either one, completely up to you. So we're gonna go ahead and go into this first bump right here from our chain, first bump right here, and we're going to work a double crochet. And what you're gonna do is, just with your finger this time, you're gonna yarn over which just means taking your working yarn and pulling it over your finger towards you. I always like to just kind of lift up that bump so I can insert my finger and my thumb, and then I'm going to grab my working yarn and I'm going to pull it one time. So you should have 3 loops on your finger. Technically 6, but we've doubled up our yarn so these count as 1. Then these 2 loops, I'm going to stick my thumb in here and I'm going to pull my working yarn through those. So now I have 2 loops. Go ahead and put my thumb in here, grab my working yarn and pull through. And that is a double crochet. This entire row is going to be just a double crochet. The rest of the blanket is also going to be a double crochet, but we're going to be doing what's called a front post double crochet, and I'll show you that and how that works as we get to rows 2 and beyond. So the next bump in our chain right over here is where our next stitch is going to go. So again, just our finger here, yarn over, again pulling towards you, go for that next stitch, and I like to, for me, I like to insert my finger and my thumb. Some people will just put finger in and pull through. For me, it's a little more challenging, so I do like to get my thumb in there. So here's 1, 2, 3 loops again. I'll pull my thumb in, pull my working yarn through, put my thumb in, and pull my working yarn through. So as you can see here, we've now got 2 double crochets. And it creates this post, if you will. And we're gonna hang on to that little piece of knowledge for the next row. So show you a few more here, and then we'll go ahead and work up the rest of our row, and I will meet you on the next one. So again, just keeping my chain flipped where all of these bumps are facing forward. Sometimes I like to twist a little bit on you as you get some weight. So just remember to identify each one of your bumps. And I'm going to go into that next stitch. I'm going to pull my working yarn through one time, grab my working yarn, pull through, grab my working yarn, and pull through. And that is the entire row and almost the entire blanket. We're just going to do a bit of a twist on that next row. Some people call this removing loops. So as you work a stitch, so I'm going to yarn over, pull through. Some people will call this remove 2 stitches and remove 2 more. So if you hear that on other instructions, that's just what they're referring to. So again, I'll yarn over, go ahead and insert my finger and thumb, grab my working yarn, remove 2, grab my working yarn, remove 2. And as you can see, this is working up to be such a tall stitch. So you can see that as we work up our blanket, as we work up our rows, it's going to work up very, very fast. Okay, and that is why that is a number 6 bulky yarn. All right, so I'm going to keep going to the end of my row here. Feel free to hit pause and go to the end of your row, and I will meet you there in just a moment. I'm getting to the end of my first row here, and I do have 1, 2, 3, 4 more stitches to do. I was just going to show you a few more so that you can see. One of the things I did notice that I was doing is when I'm pulling my working yarn through that first loop, I'm hanging on right here because it does help with the tension again, so that if I'm pulling through here and just trying to go like this, I'm kinking up the chain a little bit, if that makes sense. So by hanging on right here, it'll help keep the size of that chain consistent, and then I can keep pulling through my stitches. So hopefully that's a helpful tip for you as well, because the chains, especially when you do them loose like this, they do tend to want to kink up a little bit, and some will be looser, and by the time you get to the end, they'll be really tight if you're not controlling that tension right here. I hope that helps. All right, so last one's here, and then what we're going to do is turn our work by doing a turning chain. And I'll show you that in just a moment. So we just want to remember to always grab our last stitch, because this slip knot is counted as a stitch. And we want to make sure that gets worked into the mix here. And so again, I'll just kind of tug on that just a little bit, just to, again, control the tension. So when we get to the end of our first row here, last stitch, we're going to chain 2. Because we're doing a double crochet on the next row, just like we did on the first row, but you'll always chain depending on what stitch you're doing on that next row. So if this next row was just going to be a single crochet, I would only chain 1 and turn. But since it's all double crochet, I'm going to chain 2 and then turn my work. And what that does is it brings this to the height of the next stitch that we're going to put in here. And that way it keeps your rows nice and even, and it'll keep your border of your blanket nice and straight. Okay, so again, we are going to do a double crochet, but it is going to be just a little bit different. This next row is going to be what's called a front post double crochet. So we would yarn over just like we would, and we're not going to do this post because this already has the stitch. This is our border. What we're going to do is take our finger, our hook, and put it behind that post. Grab your working yarn just as you would. And again, I'm pulling the bottom just to control the tension. And now I've got the 3 loops. I'm gonna put my finger through here, pull through, put my thumb in there, and pull through. And what we have done is created a front post double crochet. And we're gonna continue to do that for the entire second row. So here is my next post, my next post. So each one of these posts right here, we're going to be working to create the stitch on the front, which is why it's called that front post double crochet. The third row, we're going to end up doing a back post so that all of these stitches can be on the front of the blanket. So the front of your blanket and the back of your blanket will not look the same, but each row on the front of the blanket and each row on the back of the blanket will look the same to each other, if that makes sense. So here we go to the next post, yarn over. We're gonna put our finger behind, all the way behind that stitch, all the way behind all those pieces of yarn. You don't wanna go through it, just go all the way behind it, super easy. Pull your yarn through, remove 2 stitches, and remove the final 2. And it's creating this to be even bulkier, but this one is still so lightweight that it is just luxurious. So again, yarn over. I'm gonna go to my next stitch behind, pull my yarn through, my thumb in there, pull through again, and pull through. And do a couple more here, just so you can see. And in these posts, I am able to just use my finger to pull that yarn through versus when I'm in these loops like this. It's easier for my finger and my thumb, but you do whatever is more comfortable for you, because that is what it's all about. It's not a right or wrong way to hold your fingers or which fingers to use. I mean, it is all your preference, because you don't want to feel, the more awkward you feel doing something, you're not going to want to continue it. So just do however it's comfortable for you. Okay. And then as you can see, that is just working up so fast and so pretty. And then what it's doing on the back of the blanket is it's creating what will be a horizontal line all the way, and it's going to continue all the way across. So the back of the blanket will continue to have all of these horizontal lines, and the front is going to have all of these verticals. Super, super pretty, you guys. All right, I'll show you a couple more, and then I will work up the rest of my row. And then I will show you guys how to do row 3, where we're going to create this same look, but we're going to do it on the back and do that back post double crochet. So again, yarn over, put your finger back through here, pull, and if you notice, I'm pulling this down because I don't want it to be like this. Again, then I'm going to kink my stitches. So just to keep it nice and even, I don't want it to be, you know, giant where it's too much yarn up here and this is loose. I just want it pulled to where it's even. That's all. And again, don't overthink it, just as even as possible. You'll know what looks right and what feels right when you're doing this. So again, just yarn over, go behind that stitch, pull your yarn up, remove 2, and remove 2. And give myself a little more slack on my yarn here. This part, to me, goes so fast. And don't focus on your speed first. That will come if you haven't done this type of stitch before, or if you're brand new to crochet. Don't worry about your speed. That will absolutely come. Right now, you're creating your muscle memory and making this not feel so awkward. And in addition to that, you're also trying to understand what it is you're trying to achieve by making each one of these stitches, and these types of stitches, I should say. The speed will come. If you need to put this down and go walk away and do something, no problem. Leave it as is. You can come right back, say, okay, well, there's the stitch I'm working with. In your finger goes, and on you continue. It's another thing that's so great about these. Now, if you have cats in your house, I do not. I used to, but if you have cats in your house and you leave your yarn dangling, I cannot promise you that your stitches will be intact when you get back, because it might look like something very fun to play with. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish this row. Feel free to put me on pause and go to the end of your row, and I will meet you there in just a moment. I'm getting to the end of my second row here, and as you can see, there is 1, 2. Here's where it gets a little tricky. I'll get my hand out of there. So there's 1, 2, 3. There's actually, this will be our turning chain as we go up to our third row. Okay, so we don't want to forget this one. They do kind of clump together, and you don't want to go around the whole thing, you want to go ahead and just grab your post at the end right here. So I'll just show you what that looks like. So again, I just kind of pull up, remove two, remove two. All right, so right here, I'm gonna go ahead and go behind that. I'm hanging on to that turning chain that we've created there. You want to make sure that you're creating that nice, even, straight edge. All right, and then as stated before, we do want to chain twice, and then we are going to turn our work. So this side is creating this really nice horizontal line pattern, whereas the front of the blanket is going to have this vertical line pattern. And the way that we are able to continue that is this row, we are going to do a back post double crochet. And the way that we're going to do that, same thing, we're going to yarn over, but this time you're going to pick up your blanket a little bit, and now you're going to come in from the back and around so that your finger is going through that post again. Okay, and this is a little interesting to get used to, but you can do it, I promise. Grab your working yarn, pull it through, okay? And again, I like to pull it to where everything is up about the same height. Grab your working yarn, pull that through, grab your working yarn, pull through again, okay? And so what that has done is it's continued that vertical column, if you will. And I'm loosening this up so that you can really see. I would typically have this just a little bit tighter, but I really wanted you to be able to see the pattern that that's creating. Whereas if on this row we did a front post like we did on row 2, we would start to have a vertical line here, and then this would start creating that horizontal line. And you can alternate. There are patterns that will alternate. Just for this particular blanket, I did not alternate, and I just kept it. I alternated my stitch, front post, back post, but I didn't alternate the pattern on each row. All right, so I'll show you that again. Yarn over. We're gonna reach through the back to grab that column. I'm just gonna put my finger through there, grab my yarn, pull it up. Okay, so again, I'm working through the back, stick my thumb in there, remove two, remove two again. Okay, work up a couple more, yarn over, I'm going through the back, pull up, remove two again. So it is exactly the same stitch. You're just coming in from the back of the post instead of the front of the post. And you can pull your stitches apart so you can help identify. Like I can see this column right here. I've already worked into that one, so I know I'm going to this next post. I'm gonna grab my yarn, going to remove two and remove two again. And as you'll really start to see the pattern developing, especially by the time you get to row 3. But even right now, you can see we're creating now another vertical line pattern, and then the front is just continuing this bulky vertical. We'll work up a few more, and then I will go ahead and work up the rest of this row, and then I will meet you at the end of that, and we'll go back to we'll turn and go to row 4 and then go back to that front post. So we'll just be alternating every other row, front post and back post, in order to keep the same stitch on each side of the blanket. This yarn over through the back, pull my yarn through, remove 2, remove 2 more. And it is this pattern for the rest of the blanket. I'm going to go ahead and work to the end of my row. Again, feel free to put me on pause and go to the end of your row 3, and then we will turn and start row 4 together. I'm at the end of row 3 here. I'm just going to finish up these last 2 stitches here. All right, and then once again we'll chain 2, turn our work, and you can see this. I mean, look how tall this is already working up, and that's just 3 rows, which included a chain. So you can see just how quickly this is going to go. Once again, this keeps the edge of our blanket nice and straight. Now we are going to continue this next row with the front post again, just like we did in our second row or first row after the chain. So we'll just remember that when the lines are going vertical, that's when we want to go to the front. We want the stitch up on top. And we're just going to keep doing this. Grab your next post here. All the way to the end of the blanket, you guys. And now you can see, I mean, how awesome is this? And the fact that it is super squishy and fluffy doesn't hurt either. So just to the front of every post here. Okay, that's our little tail there. And again, just continue to work down all the way through. I'm going to continue to work up my rows. Now, if you remember, we did chain on 50 stitches, and that's going to give us a width of about 45 inches wide on our blanket. And we're going to go up 60 rows. And this is a larger size throw blanket, if you will, because it's going to end up making it about 65 inches long. So about 45 by 65. It's really good size, obviously very, very chunky. But go ahead and work up your rows, and I'm going to show you before we close out the blanket how to change out our yarn once we run out. I'm getting to the end of this row, but I'm also about out of yarn. What I do like to do is go ahead and take 2 new skeins, okay? And again, just like we did our slip knot in the beginning, treat both of these as one strand, just as we will do here. And I'm going to tie a knot all together. It's that easy. Pull on that pretty tight. That's not going anywhere. And then I'm going to, my knot is right up here. I'm going to go ahead and cut this nice and close to my knot there. And there you have it. As you continue to crochet through, nobody will ever know it's there. It does get hidden within your stitches. but it does, I will say it does hide better towards the end of your row if you're gonna do a color change, or if you just really want to wait until you get to the end of a row. But if you don't have quite enough yarn to get to the end of the row, then you're taking out stitches and changing it at the other end and not using all of your yarn. And we of course don't want to ever forget this last one. It does get a little flimsy on the end sometimes until you grab it and work it into a stitch. So to finish off our blanket, as soon as we get down to that last stitch, we would normally do our turning chain, but instead of doing that, we're gonna go ahead and trim off any yarn we may have left over. And by the way, if you do have a bit of this left over, these make incredible headbands. I do have a tutorial coming on those, just because it's so soft and fits really, really nice around precious, precious heads. So I'm just gonna take this through and create a knot. I'm gonna singe that down just a little bit. And then what I like to do is go ahead and just weave this through a couple of times, a little on the loose side. You don't want it to be too tight where it's, again, singeing your stitches together. Let's do it a little bit on the looser side. And then what I will do is come around underneath here and I will tie one more knot, just for a little extra security. It just makes me sleep better at night. This knot here is never gonna come unraveled. You could just weave in the rest of this tail and be done. You could just trim that knot or that tail right at the first knot, but again, we just worked so hard on this beautiful blanket. What's a few more seconds of extra security? And then next to that second knot that I just did, there we go. And you are done with your beautiful, beautiful blanket.